Hi guys, how are you doing today? Hope you are having an amazing day. Ready for new stories? I have two today. The first is a long one, but crazy one. So listen till the end to hear insights and an update. It's about OP's sister-in-law, who told OP to leave her wedding because OP looks too good and is trying to upstage her. But the end of the story is just crazy, because someone didn't take it well. Enjoy the stories, guys, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. Background: I live in a small town in the rural north of England. I've lived here my whole life and have a job I love working on a local farm. My work uniform is overalls, basically. And my non-work uniform is usually jeans and baggy men's shirts. I don't wear makeup, and though I have long hair, I usually keep it in a simple ponytail to keep it out of the way while I'm working. I'm not a girly girl, I guess is my point here. My boyfriend Dan, 25, and I were at school together, though we didn't get together as a couple until 3 years ago when he came back from university to take over running his dad's business. He and I always got along well since school days, even though he and his family are from the posh end of town, and I'm definitely not. But we're a great couple with very similar views and goals as far as relationships and life are concerned, which is partly why we're such a good fit. Dan's sister Sarah is a little bit of a princess. Dan's view is that she's always been spoiled as she was the only girl and the youngest of 4 kids. I don't really have much to do with her because we just have nothing in common, and she's made it pretty clear she doesn't understand women who work, as she's intending to be supported by her husband, having been supported by her parents first. Sarah's wedding was 2 Saturdays ago, and it was held at what used to be the Hall, the big house on the edge of town. It was sold by the local nobility a number of years ago, and is now a fancy hotel/venue with a license to conduct weddings in what was the family chapel. The schedule was ceremony at 1 p.m., followed by a formal meal with speeches, etc., and an evening party with dancing and more people, all taking place at the one location. I've never been to a really fancy wedding before, let alone one where it will be such a long event. And it was also the first formal event that Dan and I have been to together, so I wanted to not show him up. With my mom's help, I went and shopped for a nice dress to wear, and organized an appointment on Saturday morning at a beauty place in the nearest big town for a proper hairdo and to have makeup done professionally so that it would last through the day, since I have no clue how to keep touching up. They didn't cut my hair, but for the first time ever, I wore it up and styled it something other than a ponytail. When Dan came to the house to pick me up, he told me I looked amazing, which I took with a pinch of salt. He also, because he's awesome, said it in a way that didn't make me feel bad about the way I usually look. So we went to the wedding, and the ceremony was very nice. Then we went through for the happy couple to do a handshaking line before they had photos done, while the guests mingled before eating. When Dan and I got to the front of the queue, I noticed how surprised Sarah was when she saw me. But to be honest, I'd been getting a lot of double takes, because this was so completely different than how I usually look, so I didn't think anything of it. This is when it all went to hell. While we were chatting with one of Dan's brothers and his wife, one of Sarah's bridesmaids came up and asked if she could have a quiet word with me. She took me to one side and said that Sarah said I had to leave the wedding. She was apparently furious that I'd tried to upstage her on her special day, and that I wasn't welcome anymore. She said that if I didn't just leave now, Sarah was going to ask the hotel staff to remove me. To her credit, the bridesmaid was clearly incredibly embarrassed by the whole thing. I'm sure I was blushed crimson. I couldn't believe it, but I looked around and saw Sarah watching the message being delivered with such anger on her face that I realized it was a serious demand. I didn't want to cause a fuss, so I just took Dan out of the reception room and told him I needed to go home. He was concerned that I was ill or something, because he said I looked so distressed. I wasn't going to tell him what happened, but he looked so worried that something was seriously wrong that I just started crying and told him what had happened. He didn't say a word, just went back inside, then came out 5 minutes later with my bag and shawl and his coat. Then he put me in his car and we drove back to my mom and dad's house. I kept telling him he had to go back to the wedding, but he said he didn't want to be around his sister right then, or probably ever again. I just kept crying, and he kept telling me I hadn't done anything wrong. I only found out the next day that when he'd gone back in, he walked up to Sarah and her new husband, who were having photos taken with both their parents, and told her he couldn't believe what a jealous bee she was, then told everyone what she'd done and how upset I was. Sarah's reaction was that it was my own fault, which just made him angrier, and that's when he left to take me home. But it gets worse. Sarah's parents completely take her side, but Dan's brothers and their wives are adamant that Sarah was totally in the wrong. Once they found out what had happened, his oldest brother and his wife left the wedding in protest too, before the evening event even started. I have a feeling that the sister-in-law has been on the receiving end of Sarah's spoiled behavior before. Sarah and husband went off on honeymoon the next day, but Sarah's mom has reported that she says they're rowing every day, because he says she's shown a horrible, jealous side that he couldn't believe she had. She called her mom from the honeymoon to get moral support. They're due back at the end of this week, and Dan's mom has withdrawn my invitation from the Welcome Home Newlyweds lunch she's throwing, and said I'm no longer welcome in their home because I sabotaged Sarah's day and her honeymoon. Dan has told her that she, his dad, and Sarah are no longer welcome in his house, and his brothers have all basically said the same thing. Dan's view is that even if Sarah apologized, the damage is done, and he doesn't want her poisonous presence in his life ever again. And I'm horrified that I'm the cause of this, even though I never intended to cause any trouble. How would you advise I try to help fix this mess? She's a nut job. OP should stay out of it. There's nothing OP can do. It's his family, his problem. OP did nothing wrong and has nothing to apologize for. It is great OP has an amazing boyfriend. Good for him for not giving in to his sister's ridiculous demands and for having OP's back. Even her new husband is horrified. And if my intuition is correct, her parents know exactly how out of line this was, but admitting it would be admitting they raised an a-hole. The rest of the family is in OP's corner. She embarrassed herself most of all. Update. I barely know where to start with an update, because I've learned so much about Sarah in the couple of weeks since she and her now husband Stuart got back from their honeymoon. I mentioned that Sarah and Dan's mother had withdrawn my invitation to her Welcome Back Newlyweds lunch. Well, the lunch was canceled because Dan and his brothers weren't going to attend anyway, and because everything else got so much worse. The day after they got back, Dan got a call from Stuart asking if he, and he stressed just he, could come over to see us. We agreed to meet him at Dan's house, and when he came over, he was so apologetic about the wedding and so mortified that I'd been upset at his event. He asked me to accept his apology, which he stressed was only his, as he didn't think Sarah would ever apologize, as she didn't think she'd done anything wrong. I don't really know Stuart, but he seemed really sincere, and I said that I didn't think he had anything to apologize for, as he wasn't in any way involved in the incident, but that if he felt that he should apologize, the least I could do was accept. We didn't ask him how the honeymoon was, as we'd heard about Sarah's calls to her mother and the rows that triggered them, and he didn't really say much about it. We've since heard pretty much everything from one of Dan's brothers, who plays cricket with Stuart, and it's so bad. To start with, they basically fell out irreparably on day 2 or 3 of the honeymoon because he'd found out about her getting me to leave and couldn't believe how mean and jealous she'd been. She told him why she was so angry and that it boils down to 2 main things. 1. She actually thought I deliberately set out to look better than her at her wedding, and because I'm usually such a plain Jane, the only way I could have done it was to spend a lot of money with the express intention of overshadowing her. I seriously don't think I looked that good. I think it's just relative to my usual look. 2. This one I can't forgive. When Sarah was at university, she got in with this group of other women who I've never met, but who Dan has, and he says they were all like clones of each other, all princesses with a real superiority thing going on. To give you an illustration, the reason they weren't Sarah's bridesmaids is apparently because they couldn't possibly all wear the same or even similar dresses. Sarah told Stuart that I'd made her look like an idiot to her friends because she'd been telling them for months to watch out for her brother's fat sow farmhand girlfriend who was probably going to turn up in jeans. I'm hurt that she thinks I wouldn't make an effort for her wedding, but I'm furious that she set me up as entertainment to her horrible-sounding friends. Apparently, she told him that her plan had been to have her friends laughing at me like it was just a funny thing she'd lined up, and she was angry that her friends would think she'd been overselling how dowdy I'd be. Also, by the way, I'm not fat, but I'm quite well built because I do a manual job. Anyway, when all this came out, Stuart told her he needed to think seriously about whether they should be together, and for the rest of their 10-day honeymoon, they didn't speak, had meals separately, and he spent his time doing water sports and out driving while she sat by the pool drinking all day. She had spent a long time every day talking to her mother, and when she saw him, told him, repeatedly, that he wasn't good enough for her anyway. So when they got back, Sarah went straight back to stay at her parents' house, and Stuart went back to his flat, where they were supposed to be living together once they got married. I'm not sure they've even spoken. Meanwhile, Sarah and Dan's mother is still 100% on Sarah's side, even though she knows everything I've outlined above, and kept calling Dan to shout at him about how he needs to dump that little witch, that would be me, and show support for his sister. His brothers have had similar calls, though without her telling them to dump me. That would be weird. And so far, no one except her is interested in showing any sympathy for Sarah. Their dad is caught in the middle. He initially was on her side, but now he's basically said he's not going to get involved. Dan just stopped answering her calls and has blocked her on other channels. So it looks like Sarah and Stuart are basically over before they really started, and she's taking most of the rest of her family's relationships down the ship. You might remember that in my original post, I was concerned for how I could help fix things, though most of you told me it wasn't my problem to fix. Now, I'm honestly just happy to let this disaster unfold and not get dragged any further into it. And one last update. With a strict promise that this crazy mother and sister are basically out of his life for good, Dan asked me to marry him this weekend. Obviously, I said yes. As everyone pointed out, he's a serious keeper. And here comes the ironic part. He's been planning on asking for a while, but wanted to wait until Sarah's wedding was out of the way so as not to take attention away from her day. I'm definitely past my initial concern that this was my fault and my issue to try and fix. Great job! OP just saved poor Stuart several years of hellish marriage by making an effort at his wedding. What I will say is this. If Dan and his bros are willing to cut her off over this, it's likely it's just the last straw. To OP, it's one sad and stressful occurrence. To them, this is just another douchebag move pulled by Sarah after years of douchebag moves. And of course, congratulations to OP with the engagement. I've been with my fiancé, 28 male, for 5 years now, but we're currently long distance. I've known his sister, 27 female, for most of those years. Despite my efforts, she has openly ignored me at family gatherings, not so subtly suggested in front of everyone that her brother could do better, during our engagement party, and a bunch of other immature, rude things. I've learned to ignore it and minimize my time with her as much as I can when I do see her. My fiancé's reasoning is that his sister was very spoiled growing up and isn't used to having to play nice with new people to the family. There's also a tinge of jealousy to it, as apparently her big bro always doted on her when they were young, and she doesn't like my role in his life. Essentially, since she's difficult and always has been, he thinks it's up to me to be the bigger person. I understand that to an extent, because family will be family, but I feel like I'm being increasingly expected to feed into her entitlement. Recently, my fiancé told me that his sister wants to plan a trip to LA with her girlfriends. I co-own an apartment with my parents, and it's fairly large, 4 bedrooms, 3,500 square feet, with plenty of space for guests and entertaining. My parents are on the East Coast, so I usually have the place to myself, and more than happy to host friends. The thing is, my fiancé knows all this perfectly well when he asked me if I could host his sister and her friends, 4 other women, for a week because they'd rather not spend unnecessary money on hotels. I'm left rather surprised, because his sister has never even said one nice full sentence to me, and this request seems, well, something you'd ask only of a good friend. Definitely not me. I told him I'd think about it, and he was confused, asking if there was a problem because there's more than enough room and I'm definitely in town that week. I got annoyed, because he knows full well how I feel about his sister and how hurt I've been in the past from her attitude towards me. His response was that I should look at it as an opportunity to get to know Miranda, his sister, better, and that I would be petty for rejecting on the basis of past hurt feelings. He also said that his sister apparently told him she's excited to come out to LA and see my place and hang out with me, and he's using that as proof she's the one trying to be nice and friendly this time. Am I being petty for not wanting to host despite having the means to? Or am I right in feeling reluctant and honestly a bit used? On the one hand, I do have the means to host and no logical reason to reject. But on the other, I feel suspicious that after 5 years of rudeness, ignoring me, like it's her hobby, his sister is just now saying she wants to be friends while simultaneously needing my apartment. Side note, I'm also a bit angry at my fiancé for his inability to see my side at all. He's so dead set on letting his sister have the perfect and cheap vacation with her friends that he's unwilling to see beyond the purely practical side of things. He keeps saying that while his sister may have been difficult in the past, her desire to come to LA to hang out with me is obviously her wanting to smooth things over. He's accusing me of being obsessed with my past and not seeing how things could be in the future since his sister is apparently ready to move on and be friends. Why is he being the middleman? If what he says is true about getting closer to OP, why is she not the one talking to OP? OP should tell him she would really consider it if the woman ups and actually speaks to her. This way, OP can gauge if it's worth making an effort now to have a relationship, which I personally doubt. Even if she weren't perpetually rude to OP, bringing 4 people OP doesn't know to stay in her apartment for a week is a huge favor to ask. The sister is clearly looking for a free place to stay. If she really wanted to hang out with OP, she wouldn't bring 4 other people.